anemometer just for this purpose, Ian?
I did. I bought a $15 one off of Amazon.
I think I have the same one.
I keep trying to think of a reason I need one of those.
You need one so that when it's really windy out, you can go outside and then announce to your family how windy it is.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Senior Editor Mark Peterson.
Hello.
Regular guest, builder, estimator, and son of a farmer, Ian Schwant.
How's it going, Patrick?
I thought you were going to say son of something else.
And our fantastic producer, Jeff Rose.
Hi there.
Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Well, Happy New Year, everybody.
And you guys too.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
I'm sure that's very confusing to you all.
Yeah, it took me a little
So those
off
of you
guard.
who are listening, of course, get it, but we're recording on the 21st of December, so I just sprung this on these guys, so.
Yeah.
They took it in stride, and we
wait,
ruined the whole thing.
panicked. It panicked. Just 1 second of panic there. Wait a second. Wasn't it supposed to be?
How's your house coming, Mark? Oh, I'm sorry, Ian.
I was just going to say you were making a value judgment about the grip on reality that Mark and I both have. That we wouldn't be totally
You guys didn't even
thrown
notice.
off thinking it was January.
How's your house coming,
The house
Mark?
is, you know what? They showed up with trusses. Well, the guys hanging. They started setting trusses yesterday. There was about 10 of them out here, and they had the crane, and they got them all up. I mean, they had to have been. Well, let's see. It's 30, 40 plus 20. You know, we're talking 70, 80 feet of trusses, and they're tall, and they got them all cranked out in one day.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah. They're 1212s, so they shipped out in. And I just never realized what an extra pain in the butt it is. But the top little, there's like a top little 4 or 5 foot triangle. Yeah. So I've never seen those before. I've never worked on a house that had those before. But it makes sense because they couldn't get them down the road without, they were too wide to go down the road with them.
So my experience is you have to put a couple 2x6s on the top of the lower section and then put the little triangle on top of that, right?
Yep. It's. It didn't look hard to do, but it's kind of looks like a pain in the butt. When you're up,
it's certainly are fussier than one truss, I'm sure.
And you're kind of in jungle gym mode, crawling around up there, and it's just an extra however many hours of doing that. So
do you have like bruises all over your shins from banging into?
Nope, I was not doing it. I was not up there. I haven't walked. I do have 2x6 walls, which is good, so it's a little easier to walk. But no, I haven't done that for a long time on something this big. I guess I did a garage not too long ago, but I like setting trusses. It's fun. It's rewarding.
Yeah. When's the sheathing go up?
They're coming. The whole crew's coming back out today, and that's it. Then they're done. They're kind of doing me a favor, so they snuck away from a couple other jobs. So I've got a lot of drywall blocking to do, some tweaking on some open entryways. So there's probably 2 full days of me putzing around out there, But yeah, last night they were all out there, so I thought right before they left, I came down with a cooler of beer. There's about 11 guys out there. I came down with like about a 12-pack of beer. And I set it at the end of the driveway where they were kind of packing up, and I said, there you go. And then it was just this weird vibe going on. And I came back, and I brought the wrong cooler out there. I brought an empty cooler with like just ice water in it. In my regular, I have 2 coolers that look just the same. So they're kind of like, what an asshole. I mean, it's bad enough not to have a beer, but then to get teased with a beer and not have one. So I got to make it up to them today. Yeah.
They're not coming back today. Are you kidding me?
Well, yeah, you're right. I said they were coming back. They might not be coming back.
So you had a 10-man crew setting your trusses?
11, yeah. 11, yeah.
Wow, I'm jealous.
So it's kind of like 3 different structures. So you got the in-law suite, the garage, and the house. And they're all really straightforward. There's nothing, 2 of them tie into each other, and that's it.
Can I guess that they were like working in 2 different teams? I mean, because that's a lot of people to be setting one truss.
It was kind of 3 different teams, yep. But yeah, they banged it out, man. It was great.
Well, now you got something to look at.
Yep. Yep, I do. And walking around there, it's like just the list grows long. There's only so much you can do when there's just a foundation. Now it's like, oh, that's right. I got to do that. I got to do this. I got to do that. I got to remember to tell the electrician this and the HVAC guy that. And I got to figure out where my island's going to go so you can hang the lights. I mean, the list is endless.
I always feel like you get to these milestones and then you're like, oh, it's going to be easy now. And it's never easy, right?
No.
I think Ian would agree, right? You're like, you're always
Never,
waiting
no.
for the next thing. You're like, oh, once this is done, then it's going to be good.
Yeah.
So Ian, are you a job soup as well as an estimator? I mean, are you out on the jobs kind of tracking progress or?
No, pretty much just working out of the office, doing some of the like pre-construction style project managing, taking stuff from design and getting it ready for both contract and then after contract, getting it ready to send out into the field for the guys to build. So purchase orders, vendor
Are you tracking
orders.
down which subs to use and all that?
Some, we have project managers that, once I'm done with my work, they start doing more of the means and methods stuff.
Gotcha. Have you had that role before? The project manager side of things?
Yeah. Yeah, I've had that in commercial construction and a little bit with some of the house flipping stuff that I did during the 2008, 2009 recession.
Ian, can I guess right now it is very difficult to do your job with the way prices are fluctuating so greatly? I mean, how do you put a stamp on an estimate?
It gets really hard. We actually just did what we call our feedback loop meeting, where we took a job that we had finished up earlier this year, which was 2 screen porches. And we looked at the actual data, both in material cost and labor cost, just to see how we ended up, because we did put a lot of allowances in. There was a lot of Western red cedar on the screen porches, which was all over the place. There was a lot of Trex decking, which we've had shortages of certain colors and throughout the whole year here in Wisconsin. So it was interesting to go back and see how we did and where we could have done better with our allowances. But
did you make money?
Yeah, we actually had what Remodelers Advantage would term grippage on that job, where it turned out a little better than what the estimate was, which is a rarity in remodeling. But no, that one was overall a good project.
When you get bids from suppliers and subs, do you have them guarantee a price, or won't they do that? Or
A lot of times we get 30 to 45 days. So what we've been trying to do is make sure that we get those prices as late as possible, but still within a time frame to know where the budget for the project is going to end up, so that when I get through to contract and we issue the purchase order, that it's still good within that time frame. This year I've had to start calling vendors and trade partners and ask them to guarantee it for another couple of weeks so that we could get things through contract.
How long do you give clients to make up their mind on a project?
It varies. Some people don't want to make up their mind, and some people are just, it's a formality. They've already decided they're doing it. We've given them budgets along the way that have been close enough, and they're just like, yeah, when can you start ripping apart my kitchen?
I've heard folks of having to pay up front for material, and then the lumberyard or the supplier holds it until you're ready for it. Have you had to do that too?
I don't know if we've had to do that quite yet. I think we have some Trex decking for another project that's sitting at the lumberyard that we bought months ago, but we're still waiting on maybe the rest of the load of Trex, or we're waiting on some other material.
You guys are waiting to see if you can sell it for a profit on Facebook Marketplace, like the 5 studs I have in my living room, right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're going to get close to that again.
But once a customer signs that contract, there's no wiggle room for you, right? They're locked in, or is there a clause?
They're locked in. We do have a material escalation clause that I don't think we used it at all in 2021, mostly because we were using allowances pretty heavily where we knew the lumber market was volatile, or knew that there'd be issues in sourcing a material.
It seems like there's no end in sight, too. I hear lumber is skyrocketing again. Is that true? Yeah.
Yep.
$1,000 per thousand, right?
Yep.
Wow.
And what was it, a year and a half ago, 300-ish?
I think when all this started, it was around 300, and then it would seasonally adjust up a few
4.5,
percentage points based on housing starts. But we keep building houses, we keep remodeling, and we keep having less and less acres of forest to produce lumber from.
Jeff, do you have anything to add to our morning chat? You got any projects coming up?
No, I'm gonna kind of hibernate this winter, I think.
Nothing wrong with that.
The one project I just finished over the weekend, Patrick, was I actually fixed my garage door that I stupidly installed myself and never should have.
No.
So I had two garage doors and I was 1 for 2. My wife's garage door worked and mine did not, but I got rid of my truck and got a little electric car, so I wanted to be able to plug it inside the garage. So that was my big push to get that garage door working and get the
What was wrong with it, and what did you have to do?
Well, I think I had it out of level when it was sitting on the garage floor. I think I just set it on the garage floor and built it up that way. And I actually burned out the first garage door opener during my test run. So I had to go and get a new garage door opener, which,
You mean Chamberlain didn't warranty that sucker?
Yeah, no, we're not going there. I could have bought
when you see those, go ahead.
I could have bought the new part that I burned out, but it was like the equivalent price of another opener. So
yeah, was it the little plastic worm drive?
Yeah.
You learned your lesson on that, I guess.
Yeah, I figured I was going to take one more stab at fixing it and seeing if I could do it before calling in a pro.
When you see those pros do that, they literally do it in like 45 minutes. I mean, they're just in, and then, whatever it costs. I mean, those guys are doing like 8-10 doors a day, and you can spend one whole day on a door
to
I think
save
I've
whatever,
got like
a week into this.
$150 or something. Yeah, it's like that is not the place to save money, that's for sure.
Yeah, I have an embarrassingly large amount of time into those two garage doors, so it's just good time after bad. But and then I got the wood shop set up in the garage for making some furniture. I'm making a conference room table for the office here, and then my father-in-law, who people would have seen in the Fine Homebuilding house videos that we did, turned it into Santa's workshop over the last few days, and knocking out all the last-minute gifts.
That's awesome. So how big is this table, and what's it made of?
I got some book-matched walnut from my local lumber yard, and it's just a 6-foot long by 30-inch wide stand-up meeting table.
Neat. You gonna hand plane that walnut?
No, I had the lumber yard run it right through their time saver, so I just have to glue it together.
That's the way to go.
I had to deal with my whole house water filter over the weekend. I went to change the cartridge because it was full of sediment. I wasn't getting any volume, and of course, when I put that thing back together, it's got a steady drip. And I ordered O-rings from Amazon. I got O-rings from the hardware store, and nothing solved it. The guy at the hardware store suggested it might have had a hairline crack in the housing, so I ended up replacing it. And it's like, this thing is only 4 or 5 years old. What is up with that? It's just a hassle.
Is that what it was? Is that what it was?
When I replaced it, it was fine,
Oh.
Yeah, I have one of those, and I'm not looking forward to getting that big goofy wrench out and taking it apart and changing the filter in it.
Yeah.
I put that off as long as I possibly can because it's always going to go sideways. I don't know what's up with that.
Yeah, it's kind of a mess. And then I don't know about yours guys, but man, that thing it's stuck on there so hard every time. It's just, it takes like 300 pounds of pressure to pull that thing apart.
And I keep looking at the wrench and thinking, there's no way I'm not breaking that wrench.
Yeah, the first time
I try to use it.
Yeah, that's exactly. I am a big fan of those things. Those solved a lot of my problems at my last house with really nasty well water.
I tried to buy the bigger housing at the hardware store thinking that it was, I could go longer, it would be better made. It was $100 versus 60 or whatever. And I brought it home and I realized it had 1-inch fittings on it. So mine are 3/4 and I didn't have any reducers that big. It's like, I had to take it back. And then once they didn't have all the parts at the hardware store that they would at a supply house. So I didn't have enough room for their goofy reduction strategy and had to go with the smaller housing anyway. What a hassle. That took half of my day.
Yeah, that's frustrating, especially when you got plans to do something else afterwards. Oh, I'm going to do this and this and this, and then you get stuck on that one thing.
Carol, turned the knife when she asked me how many trips to the hardware store did it take to do this little project. It's like, do you hate me? Once again, we got some great feedback. This comes from Barbara. No, not that Barbara. Hello, Patrick. Just listened to podcast 416 from December 17th and wanted to take a moment to say how enjoyable it was. Ian really added a lot to the quality of the show. Please don't take that the wrong way, though, as I'm not saying it's just okay otherwise. I just thought this particular one really stood out. If
I'm not
say
used to
just
standing
okay,
out in a positive way. It's nice reinforcement.
Yeah, you're doing a great job. You would think that you've done this all your life.
I'm just good at talking to you, Patrick. That's all. It's just like you and me at Bad Dream having a beer. That's all this is.
Boy, that was fun, too. Look forward to having to come out there and seeing your place.
Yeah.
By the way, Wisconsin has the best bar names on the planet.
Yeah.
You could write a coffee book on every single. It's amazing. You can't have a bar.
I think that's our $1 million idea, Mark.
You can't have a bar that's just called Steve's Bar. It's got to be bad idea. What the heck?
Or do
awesome.
drop in or stumble on in, stuff like that.
Yep, stumble on in. Yep.
So we had some feedback on YouTube regarding our discussion of PEX A versus PEX B. You guys were on the show when we talked about this. Somebody wrote PEX A is the Uponor / expansion type. PEX B is crimp fittings, etc. And then someone else wrote, how does FHB not know the difference in PEX?
We knew it.
Yeah.
We knew it was going to happen.
Right. Although, wait a second, how do we know this guy is telling us, how to know he's right?
Well, I did Google
it's one of those
it
things, yeah. Yeah, that's it.
Well, it has more to do with how it's made. So there's
that was
a
my understanding too,
manufacturing process that lends itself better to the press fittings or the crimp fittings, and it's into the chemistry end of cross-linked polyethylene.
Yep.
Oh man, I bet that's a 400 level class in chemistry and
well,
engineering.
The funny thing is that Patrick, you probably did a PEX story 3 years ago, and you were probably an expert for a month.
No, that was Matt Milham.
You sure that commenter wasn't Matt Milham?
Well, it very well could have been. I'm a copper fan. I think you guys know. I'm old school.
Yeah.
This comes from Dack. Hi, FHB podcast. I discovered this really great resource I have not heard about on the podcast, Construction Instruction. Unfortunately, it seems like their best content is only on their app, which is odd these days, but there is a ton of great building science content and some super helpful assembly animations that I've not seen elsewhere. And he put a link here, constructioninstruction.com. Anyhow, I think your audience would like it a lot. Dack. Well, thanks, Dack. Have you guys checked this out?
I have it on my phone.
It's good, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about it?
Did you have it on your phone before this letter?
Yeah, so somebody turned me on to it when I was doing my passive house training, that it was a good place to find simple assemblies and the background on why certain things worked and didn't work. I think it's some people out in Colorado that put it together, but to Dack's point, it is really app heavy. So while there is a lot of good video content and PDF content on there, it is all on your phone, which can make it a little bit difficult to pull up.
But I mean, I think they're going for, most people want to look at this while they're working, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly. That's what it's geared towards.
So my understanding, Patrick, is that Fine Homebuilding is they're looking into doing something like this.
So well, that's a good idea.
Yeah, and I think they're going to have you spearhead it.
I think that's a great
project.
idea, Mark.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think that's a fantastic use of technology. Why wouldn't you do that?
I think you guys kind of have that with the project that Rob had put together, putting
project
all
guides.
of the project guides together. I think are along a similar line, but toward a different market than construction is going for.
I think all that stuff is great. YouTube, all of it. This comes from George. This is our first question. Hey, FHB podcast crew. I was hoping to get an opinion on the following. I bought my first house this past year, and while I consider myself fairly handy, I'm terrified of larger scale remodel projects. The entire upstairs in my single-story cape needs an interior overhaul, and I want to implement an exterior air barrier at the roof sheathing instead of messing around with ceiling knee walls. What's the play? Do I, 1, just go all in, start demoing, and once I get down to structure, learn by doing? 2, take it one room at a time? 3, do smaller projects to build skills? If so, what examples are good? I don't occupy the upper floor right now, but demo would include an upstairs full bath of plumbing, which looks bad anyway. Lots of trades all stacked up on top of each other. Am I being overly cautious? Thanks so much, George. Wow, what a great question. Who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Ian.
So do you know, Patrick, is he talking about using like spray foam at the underside of the sheathing as
I bet George would welcome our input on that.
Air barrier? Because that was the one big question I had. Is he talking about doing that, or is he going to use some other kind of insulation material with like Intello or another vapor barrier on the inside? I can understand his not wanting to mess around using or doing it on the knee walls. That I think makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, say he was going to spray foam the underside of the roof sheathing with a couple inches of foam. I guess you're asking because if you're going to do that, it depends on how much demo you want to do, right?
Yeah.
So if you're going to do spray foam on the underside, you want to demo it all so you can do it all at once.
Right. And that
go ahead.
No, go ahead, Mark.
So I would say it is if you're going to do anything upstairs, might as well, and especially if you're not living up there, just do it all at once and get rid of it because every project is so messy. And as far as being, a little unsure about, one of the best ways to learn something is just by tearing it apart. I mean, when I was a kid, I would tear apart lawnmowers and chainsaws, and much to the chagrin of my parents, of course, because they did. And you've arrived when you can actually put them back together and they work again. that didn't always happen. But
I'm still working on that, man.
You're not going to do too much damage by tearing it apart. And, just be careful about wires and plumbing and that sort of thing. And asbestos and lead. Yeah. So you got to be careful, but it's a good way to get going, and then you kind of know what you're dealing with. And because really, if you're handy, you don't want to pay someone else to demo anyway. So you might as well just start with that and then see what you got going on. And as far as the knee walls go, those 1.5 stories are, notorious. Well, it depends. Did he say where he's from? I mean, if you're in the north, probably is. They're so hard to insulate. So a hot roof.
And it's, no matter where it is, they're a problem because it's either cooling or heating, right? And the air barrier and those is very nefarious, right?
Yeah. The one thing that I would add to his being terrified of a large scale remodeling project would be to try and do some kind of planning exercise where he thinks about the project from it being complete and then doing a pull planning, working himself back and thinking about like what that last step is. So if it's painting, how long that's going to take, and work your way back through to drywall and mechanicals and insulation, and then try and just think about how he has to plan his other trades, because he's talking about lots of trades stacked up on top of each other. And I think I've found through my career the pull planning is a much better way to do specific individual projects and get your trades lined up correctly.
You described it as pull planning, Ian?
Yeah, pull planning is what they call it in the larger commercial construction sense, where you were doing like some of the work I did in Vassar Hospital in New York, where we remodeled a 10,000 square foot area of the hospital that dated back to, I think, the late 1800s. We started with all the trades and talked through what everybody needed to do to execute their scope of work, and then built the schedule back from the ideal finish date of the job.
Is pull,
Well,
P-U-L-L, pull?
Yeah, pull, because you're pulling everything back toward the beginning. And the idea is that you're starting with your ideal outcome. And for us, we were dealing with a lot of medical professionals that had some pretty intense needs out of the project. And we've done operating rooms same way. You start with the final need of the end user. And in George's case, he's the end user, so he knows what it needs to look like for himself at the end.
Playing devil's advocate, and George describes himself as handy, which means he probably likes this stuff. What if you tear into your entire upstairs of your house and decide you hate doing this kind of work? And what do you guys say?
It's always a risk.
Yeah. And budget, I mean, it has a lot to do with budget. If he can afford to have it done by anybody else, then that's less risky. But if that's not if that's not a possibility, yeah, that could be a problem. You might have a mess up there for many years. One other thing to consider is nowadays, it makes me sound really old, but we just talked about that app that shows you how to do things. There's so much, and with YouTube and all the resources at Fine Homebuilding, it's much easier to do it today than it would have been 10 years ago.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good point, Mark. And if he's in a position where he's got to think about whether or not he actually wants to be doing that or can afford to, I think doing the planning exercise for him would be really helpful, because you're going to find some of the cost stuff that you're going to have to go through. You'll start to realize it sooner if you sit down and try and plan the whole project instead of just getting up there and spreading your tools out and demoing your whole second floor without having thought about it.
Right. And you got to consider the marriage too. Is his marriage strong enough to go through a remodel project like that?
I would, tell George to think about what time of year he does this too, because if you suddenly take out your existing air barrier, your plaster or your drywall, and it's the middle of winter, your life is going to be very difficult for a period of time, and you're going to find yourself ordering a mummy bag from REI to get through the evenings. This comes from Chris in Chicago. Greetings again, FHB crew from Chicago. I posted a question on Green Building Advisor the other day and didn't get much response except from Kylie. She's the best. So I thought I would throw it to yous, guys. I'm framing an older house basement with brick foundation walls. There's not enough space to do 2 inches of rigid insulation and a 2x4 wall to do some piping and other mechanicals. Would a 2x2 framing cavity with drywall finish be problematic as far as moisture or mold problems from air leakage or temperature differences? Thanks as always. Love the podcast. Chris in Chicago. Well, what do you guys think? Can you put basement mechanicals on a 2x2 wall?
Depends on what they are, right?
Yeah. Electrical for sure. 1.5 inch pipes. Yep. You just got to be careful when they're going through that you're putting, that metal protective plate.
Nail plates.
So you're not screwing screws into it. As
far
as the moist, go ahead, Ian.
I went on to GBA and I looked at his original post and looked at where Kylie directed him, and she did direct him to some really good Martin Holiday pieces, and I think Dana Dorset had some commentary with another person who asked similar questions, and there's a lot of good information in there, mostly centered on his question about his question about like the air sealing and the brick and moisture.
I'd be a little worried about the above grade brick. If you're going to put it on the cold side of the, assembly now, it's going to be a lot more susceptible to spalling and not drying out.
Yeah, brick needs to dry out from both sides, is my understanding, and it's very porous. So, and it depends what they're starting with and what the soil conditions. I mean, it'd be nice to start with some type of moisture meter to see what you're dealing with down there before you do anything.
Yeah, and the jobs we do like this at TDS, we end up installing drain tile around the perimeter of the basement and then connecting the back side of the foundation wall to that drain tile using like Dimple mat or
Dimple,
something.
sure.
Something along those lines to give it a place to dry out to. But he's talking about not having a lot of room, and that does it starts to stack up on the foundation wall.
Are those Dimple? I've never done a Dimple wall. Yeah, no, I personally never ran a job that had Dimple walls, but I've seen them done. Are they pretty much foolproof? I mean, have you had any callbacks or anything? I mean, it's kind of a foolproof method, isn't it?
Yeah, not to my knowledge. And I did the same thing on the outside of my foundation wall at my house. So I did the waterproofing membrane and then Dimple mat over that and ran the Dimple mat down to where the drain tile runs across my footing drain. So, and
what Dimple product did you use, Ian?
I think it was Certainteed's Platen is the one that's easily available at most supply houses. I think some of the big box stores actually carry it.
Is it enough to
rolls.
nail that like to the mud sill, or does that need to be attached with powder actuated fasteners or something in the field too?
So I did all of mine with like an aluminum parting strip and then tap conduit straight to the below grade part of the foundation. So
Is
mine
it
is
easy to work
below
with?
grade. Yeah, I found it pretty easy to work with.
And you tape the seams?
Tape the seams and then or overlap them, I think is another way that you can go about doing it, as it is made to let water wick in from the ground on the other side of it, but it allows it to get filtered and run down the foundation wall as opposed to getting stuck in the aggregate or the dirt that's around your exterior wall.
Do you know the logic of why it's porous? Why is it not completely vapor impermeable from the outside? That's kind of weird to me.
I think it's just a water management strategy when it's used on the outside. And it just holds itself off the foundation wall, which is where the dimples come from. But I think in the case of this question, by using it on the inside, that's also going to give you that air gap in front of the brick as opposed to just spray foaming directly to the brick.
Mm-hmm.
Did it come in sheets or rolls?
A big roll. Yeah, big roll. So we just
and it's still,
got it fastened in one corner and just started rolling it along the house. And I think we just rolled it right along the top of the footing so that we could get the moisture back down to the footing. And the footing was wrapped up onto our foundation wall with the waterproofing membrane. But it's the same general idea if you do an interior drain tile.
Where do you have your drain tile going to, Ian? Does it come out above grade, or do you have some kind of dry well or something?
We have a sump pump in the basement, but then it also does drain to daylight at our exposed basement foundation.
I thought you had a slab on grade for some reason.
Possibly because we have the heat in the basement, and the basement acts as our bedrooms. So,
gotcha.
I'm going to go to Josh from GBA. Hello, first time poster here. Looking to see if there are any problem areas with this assembly. I'm playing around with a wood foundation assembly based on Mike Gerton's suggestion from his 2020 presentation. This would be a self-build ADU a few years in the future. I'm planning to get an engineer to sign off on everything because this is a lowish seismic area and I've never built a house, just done extensive remodeling and a habitat build. Some details: it's zone 3A, mixed humid climate bordering zone 4, Carolina clay, gently sloped site. There are termites, water, and radon intrusion are big concerns here. I didn't write it down, but the rain screen will be wrapped top and bottom with a screen to keep out pests. I threw in an inner zip sheeting layer in case as an additional fire/seismic protection. Not certain if it's necessary though. This shot is of the crawl space. The main wall assembly is different based on the Bonfiglioli design. The roof plan is a bit unusual with large applied eaves, so if there's any interest, I could post that as well. I'm aiming for near passive house performance, but not currently planning on getting it certified. All right. So Josh posted this on GBA, and I sent you guys a drawing of his planned assembly. Mark, you want to describe what's going on? He's doing a PWF.
Yeah, so it just basically, it's instead of, your CMU or whatever kind of masonry foundation wall, it's basically plywood and looks like he's got just a standard, what has he got there? So it's a standard, it's not even a concrete footing, so it's a compacted gravel footing. He's got a regular framed up 2x6 wall with a plywood on the exterior, and then he's got some foam and a coating over the foam, and then a boral panel over that. So it's basically, there's no concrete in this whole assembly. So it's all plywood and things to protect the plywood.
Ian, first off, what do you think about permanent wood foundations?
I've never seen one, but if Mike Gerton says they work and knows a way for him to work, I'm gonna yield to him. I think that was
Matt Milham's exact description too. He's like, I've never seen one. It seems kind of weird, but if Mike Gerton says it works, what the hell we might argue?
I did something very similar to this with Mason Lord at HVP on an antique home in New York that had like this kind of unfortunate porch that somebody had turned into part of the dining room, and they were getting like all kinds of cold and raccoons and just crazy stuff into their house through this porch. And we did something very similar to this. I don't remember if we did a boral panel or maybe we did the boral stone, Versetta stone product instead of the boral panel, but it was really similar to this. We dug it out and trenched along the perimeter of it and did this to block it off.
I work and still a current friend. I'm actually going to go visit him soon in Arizona, which will be nice. But he, for 20 plus years, he built those geodesic domes in the 70s, and he built them all over the world. Actually, I think he built one in Iceland or something. And they all had plywood foundations, and his house and shop both have plywood foundations, and there's zero issue. He's had zero issues at all, and he was encouraging me to do that on my house that I'm building, and I just thought, nah. But you know what? I would consider doing it. I would absolutely consider doing this.
Even with your red clay, Mark?
Yeah, if it's protected, why not? And plus, it's just, part of my motivation is it's really tough to be reliant on masonry guys, especially nowadays. So if you can count on carpenters or do it yourself, I mean, that's a huge, huge difference. It's a schedule saver. It's a big time money saver. So I'd feel absolutely comfortable even with clay. I would backfill it with some more drainable material. And actually, they say it's one of the best termite preventions you can do is, I think it's the super duper fine, like sugary sand. If you backfill a layer of that next to your foundation, those termites, that soil isn't stable enough, and it just keeps collapsing in on the little tunnels. So they don't like that type of soil. So if I was to do this,
Great Escape.
Yeah, right. Yep. So I'd be careful what you backfill with, and you. I don't know what they coated his with. I think they just coated it with Atari. Atari back in the day is just a roll-on thick asphalt type, rubber coating, and that was it. But whatever you coat it with, that's the part of this you have to be extremely careful with. I mean, whatever you're going to protect this, that surface from the soil, that's what you got to pay attention to. But why not?
I've come 180 on this. That used to just be completely bizarre to me, but for the reasons you guys identified, you can do this yourself, for one, to save money, or do it some places where you don't necessarily have a batch plant, and there's these foundations have been in service now for decades.
Yep.
Who's to argue with that?
What do you think of his floor? Does he have like a wood floor sitting on it? I was having a hard time figuring out what that was on the
Yeah, I'm
drawing.
not
Photo.
100% clear. But you know, we just finished up a story that'll be in the next issue that it's about doing a John Salinger in Portland, I believe. He does plywood floors, plywood, slab on grade, or slab on grade plywood floors instead of concrete, and
With
yeah,
insulation
wow.
underneath. I think that's a key element, right? We have
Yes.
that's the keys to the kingdom.
Yep. Well, there's a lot. Yeah, I mean, he's got it down to it. You can't just slap plywood on the ground and call it good. Yeah, there was a system to it for sure. But if you're not a fan of concrete, man, that type of slab and then this type of foundation walls, you can't. If you're going to do in his detail here, this looks like there's no frost footings at all, and that just might be.
I think the original design uses either a 2x8. I think it's a 2x8 or 2x10 on compacted gravel is like the version that's in the IRC, and I forget what body designed the foundation system. And Mike Gerton's gonna email me and tell me this will be the second or third time he's told me whose details these are.
Yeah. So,
What do you think
if you got to do a stem wall, just make sure your excavator digs enough space for you to work around in there, because you're going to be spending a little bit of time down in there.
What do you think of his 1/2-inch zip sheathing on the inside, Patrick?
I don't quite get that, but I mean, you definitely don't want interior air getting inside that stud cavity, because it's going to condense potentially on the sheathing layer. But he does have, what is it? How thick is his insulation layer? 1.25 inch. I've never seen that thickness at the lumberyard. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but
no, I've never seen that.
You need to have enough out there to control. What am I trying to say? Control humidity on the inside of the sheathing.
Yeah. I was wondering why he
looks
was picking fiberglass too for the cavities. It seems like anytime you're going to go below grade, the mineral wool is a much better way to go.
Yep.
One of the original details I've seen in these assemblies is they want you to like put fiberglass in there, but leave like a 4 or 5 inch space at the bottom so any condensation can run out the bottom of the wall, which seemed like kind of a, the wrong way to go about it. But
that zip. This looks like a crawl space too. So he would just put the zip on and then just leave it, I assume. Because if
that was the way
finish,
I read it, yeah.
Yeah, I don't, you're not necessarily allowed to do that because you're not supposed to have like combustible materials, know.
And you could probably paint it. Well, I know you can coat it with a fire-resistant paint coating, but those things are really expensive.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering why he's not just doing like Type X rock with one coat of fire tape on it or something. Not to mention it's like 1/4 of the cost of 1/2-inch zip sheathing.
Mm-hmm.
I think, an air barrier on the interior is definitely a good idea for why we, what we just mentioned. We don't want interior air getting in. But if this is an unconditioned space, and once again, I don't think we know that, this doesn't matter. Your insulation layer is going to be in the floor, and this is going to be outside of the thermal boundary. So I think you need to first decide, what's the outside of your house and what's the inside.
Typically, though, you would want to condition this as a crawl space, correct? If this was going to be the crawl space for the entire home.
Yeah, especially, we have to if you have mechanicals in there, right?
Right.
I'm not a fan of unconditioned crawl spaces.
So you're conditioning yours, Mark, in your new build?
Absolutely. Yeah, but mine's bigger. Mine's more of a storage. I mean, it's half of it's like 6 feet tall, so that's where all the mechanicals are going down in there. Yeah, you know what? Even if it was a standard 3-4 foot crawl space, I would condition it. It's just.
So have you gotten any pushback from the folks working on your house with that? Like, because in your area, vented crawl space, I'm sure, is very commonplace.
Very common. Yep. No pushback at all. They're surprised when I tell them I'm doing that, but no pushback. And I don't know.
Do they say, why the hell are you heating this part under your house you're not going to use?
Right. Well, because I like fresh air and no mold, and I just don't like the idea of having a space directly under my feet being 60 degrees different temperature than my interior of my house. Just seems
Oh,
like
and
a
in the
bad
summer,
idea.
it's going to be, it would be a swampy mess under there, right? And it would be horrible.
Nope. And a lot of these places, people store stuff in them anyway, and that stuff just gets moldy and gnarly and nasty down there.
What kind of mechanicals are you putting in the crawl space, Mark?
Heat pump, just a heat pump, just a ducted heat pump, or basically, yeah. One thing I haven't figured out yet, and maybe next episode, but you mentioned you have an HRV. You don't have a forced air system in yours, do you?
Correct. Yeah, I just have the HRV is in its own independent system.
Where is there throughout the house? Are there ducts to this thing throughout the house, or what did you do?
Yep. So I did two large trunk lines for supplies and one large trunk line for a return and one shorter one for a return based on where the unit ended up in my mechanical room. But I ended up using one from Honeywell because you can independently balance each fan inside of it, which then if you just have a anemometer to check the wind speed or CFM that it's pulling, you can go back down to the unit and adjust it as needed for the various areas that you're trying to pull air from or supply air to.
Did you buy an anemometer just for this purpose, Ian?
I did. I bought a $15 one off of Amazon.
I think I have the same one.
I keep trying to think of a reason I need one of those.
You need one so that when it's really windy out, you can go outside and then announce to your family how windy it is. That's what I do with mine most of the time.
So how did you adjust? I mean, what is there's just calculations? You want this much air flowing into this much space, or is it a comfort thing that you adjust to? Or okay.
Yeah. So the manual came with all of these graphs, and it's a lot more information than I can understand, but I know what the square footage of my house is, and I know the size of the rooms. So there's a lot of adjusting you can do once you know the CFM that it's pulling, and then you can adjust it per room with dampers in your vent registers.
And how often is it turning over the air?
I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head. I know that we did tone it down for the winter so that it's doing it less because we were
super dry, right?
Yeah, I think we were like 20% humidity inside the house, which was getting, you get a big shock every time you touch one of the dogs. So we reined it back in.
This is the first winter for your house that there's not tons of
No
moisture
kidding.
coming out, right?
Yeah. No, we tried really hard, including hooking up the HRV during construction and running it while we were in there working, nonstop to try and keep the humidity down and, leaving all the windows open. Yeah.
Good for you. We got one more question I want to get to, and did I send you guys John's question? No, this will be new to you too. So, okay. Hello, podcast. I'm a subscriber/contractor here in Connecticut. I have a customer with a room with an exterior wall with varying levels of moisture in it, and I can't seem to figure out what's going on. I have looked for and emailed a couple different companies here in the state with no response. I'm reaching out to you guys to see if you've worked with any specialists here in the state to deal with troubleshooting moisture problems in walls. Any info would be appreciated. My customer noticed the paper on their sheetrock in a second floor bedroom with 2 exterior walls was torn up near the ceiling. I brought in my pinless moisture meter and it was off the charts, 100% wet. The other walls in the ceiling have been consistently bone dry in the 5% range. The other exterior wall is approximately 2 feet from the damaged area. We went in the attic. There are no stains or moisture. We checked the roof, fascia, siding. Everything looks good. There's no peeling, paint, staining, or any other evidence of water or moisture trying to escape. I pulled off a cedar clapboard and there was no stains. It was bone dry, but at that height, they must have ran out of house wrap because it was just sheathing, but the sheathing looked good. There are no trees or shrubs nearby, and it's about 6 feet from the chimney. We went in and cut out a square of wallboard, and the lack of dust with the cut was more proof there was moisture in the wall. I've been back multiple times over the past year, and I make notes on the wall what date it is, the moisture level. I was there last week, and it was dry, so there seems to be a seasonal effect to this. I've heard of vapor drive and other terms, but it just seems very odd where it's occurring. The room down below has been consistently dry every time I go there and check it out. And everyone I've talked to doesn't have any suggestions. Could the lack of house wrap cause this? I have a feeling there could be other spots that they didn't wrap and they might be fine, but who knows? I'd obviously rather not pull off all the cedar clabs if I don't have to, but there's only so many things that could be causing this. I checked the neighboring room a couple months ago and it was showing higher moisture levels, but no obvious wallboard damage like the other room. This has been a real head scratcher, and I was hoping to find someone who is more experienced in the scenario and possibly has better technology, an IR camera, etc. What do you guys think? My initial thought was that if they have an air leak or an insulation void, this could be a condensing surface, right? This would be the coldest spot in the room, and the interior moisture would condense on this spot. So does that seem plausible? But we don't know when this is happening. If it was the dead of winter and that was happening, that would be a no-brainer to me. But if the moisture is elevated in other seasons, I wouldn't be as sure that my answer was correct.
Didn't he say that it's a north-facing exterior wall?
Okay. I don't see that here.
Or maybe I heard that wrong.
Why do you bring that up, Ian?
Well, because if it was, then it would be a colder end of the house. It could be shaded. It's not getting any sun to heat it up and dry it off. But I'm thinking along the same lines as you are, Patrick.
The other thing, it could be solar vapor drive, right? Say this is the sunniest elevation of the house, and up at the top, it's missing the house wrap. So that sun's baking on the wall. It's driving it toward the interior, especially if the house is air conditioned, right? That's going to, once again, we have the condensing surface that could be the situation here.
When I was a siding contractor for a big builder that, hundreds of houses a year, and we would go around and track down leaks. That was part of, once a month, me and the service guy would. So the most common places that we found leaks were if there's a wall, and by the way, if in the attic, just because you don't see stains doesn't mean that you're not. The water's not always going to leave a stain. So and the other thing is, it's amazing.
So you think you should go up there when it's raining actively, right, Mark? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but there's even more to that. But it's you'll be surprised how far there could be a leak 20 feet away, and it just follows these framing members and comes out some totally bizarre place. So don't assume that it's right there above the leak. And then the other thing is, so if there's a wall roof connection right above it, people never did those properly. Like a dormer wall meets the roof, they never wrap the ice and water up the wall or pull it around the corner.
It correctly,
it was a super common place for leaks. The other place was in between the soffit and the siding. Sometimes there's a seam there that water, and it's usually here's the other weird thing. Some people would go a whole year without any leaks, and it just, these one particular rainstorm, they would get a leak. And I discovered that it was always, where we lived in the Twin Cities area, if it was summer, the rain would come from the southwest, and if it was winter, it would come from the northwest, like 19 out of 20 times. But occasionally, you got a weird storm that came from the other direction, and that's when the leaks would appear. And it would happen all the time. We get all these calls. We work for homeowners associations as well, and we'd get all these calls, and I knew they would come because this weird storm came from the other way, and it just never happened. It was a kind of a driving wind scenario. So I would have them pay attention to when this thing gets wet, because then you can kind of narrow down, that it's the wind is driving it from a certain direction, so it kind of leads you in a different way, a place to look. So we did a lot of them, and it was always surprising where they came. And of course, where windows, if there's a window or any kind of penetration.
The chimney is suspect too. It's 5 feet away, but as you said, you could have water traveling on top of the underlayment, the roofing underlayment, and pop out anywhere, right?
So what we would do is we would take a garden hose and we would work, wherever the leak was, we would start spraying water on the wall right above the window, and just keep working your way higher and higher and higher, and take your time, because these leaks often take a little while to start. And then keep working your way up onto the roof, and eventually you should be able to find it. But make sure you don't just start blasting the whole wall. That's not going to help you. Start at the lowest point first, and then
targeted
work your way
testing,
up.
right? You want to
Yep.
test small areas so you know the result.
Yep,
One of the
exactly.
things that I learned from Andy Engel during my year or so of working with him at HVP was you should do what Mark just said, but also get a blower door and depressurize the house because he found a leak in a home that HVP had done an addition on. Because to Mark's point, they realized that this leak was only happening when the weather came directly from the east. So then Andy and Mason came up with this theory that it was doing something to pressurize the house in a specific way, which was sucking water through one little tiny spot, I think at the mull of a window. And then once it got in, that pressurization was just letting it wick to strange areas in the house.
Water will go uphill if it's subject to enough negative air pressure. And I've seen amazing footage of coastal storms where water is just pouring in this ridge vent because the wind is so strong that it's sucking it inside. And you just wonder what is going on in the attic of this house.
Yeah, so this particular contractor could get a blower door person in there. They could IR cam it while doing that and do Mark's suggestion of really hitting it with the hose and seeing if they can simulate that rain with the right pressure.
I think John should take this opportunity to spend a couple $100 and buy himself a cheap infrared camera.
Yep.
Because a lot of times you can see things owing to the fact that as water evaporates, it cools the surface. So you can actually see the path of water sometimes and not just where it ends up. And I think that would be a good first step because you don't have a lot invested. And if you're there anyway, it's just a matter of looking at the same spot through the lens of this camera.
And a good second step would be a $4,000 blower door purchase, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard of folks who have to wait till it's like, I think Diami was telling me it's summertime and very early in the morning, and sometimes leaks will show up because they've gotten cold from night sky radiation, right? That if you have a very clear night, that wet spot is going to be colder than the rest of the roof early in the morning, and once the sun comes up and heats up the whole roof, you can't see the subtleties, but. Kind of cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you guys think it's very cool.
I think it's cool.
If you didn't,
we're getting into defense mode, Patrick. Like you guys don't think I'm cool.
I think you can rent. I think there's a local place that actually rents those cameras in my town.
I was going to bring up the fact that a moisture meter, especially a pinless moisture meter, are notoriously inaccurate, right? Yeah. They don't do a very good job of telling you how much moisture is there. A pin meter is better, but,
Then you got holes in your wall.
Yeah. I mean, am I wrong about that, Ian? Isn't that what you've heard too? Is that, like, if you're testing lumber or what have you, you cannot rely on one of these pinless meters, right?
No, I have one of I think it's a Wagner one that does all different materials at different thicknesses. So you can send a pulse into the material at like 3/8, or you can send it in at 3/4 if it's thicker material, and it comes with a little book with the codes to put in for each material. But I'm pretty sure drywall's in there, and but I used that to check all of my rough framing and my sheathing before closing the house up with insulation. It was an excuse to buy a $500 moisture meter that I wanted anyways for woodworking.
Well, that's what I understand. Well, it's been a pleasure, gentlemen, as always.
We out of time already?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that went quick.
Do you think we were helpful to John at all? Is he going to be able to track down that leak now?
Oh, yeah. He's got it.
I think he's got to call you and Andy, and you guys can go over there and check it out. He said he's in Connecticut.
Oh, my God. I'd love to tear into his client's house. Oh, yeah, look at this. I think it's great that he's working so hard to fix this problem for these folks. That is exceptional, right? That's like, just to have someone come up and then to try and keep monitoring it to figure out. That's cool.
They can be really tricky and frustrating. It's like an electrical problem in your car or something like that. It's just, especially if it's intermittent, it's just, it makes it that much more difficult.
If you can have your client, John, keep track of the weather when this is at its worst, and maybe leave your meter with them and, for a couple weeks and have them check, daily even, see what's going on. Oh boy. And I was thinking of one of those HOBA data loggers, right? Maybe might be helpful.
Yep.
Don't they have one of those that measures surface moisture even?
Yep.
A what?
A HOBA data logger. You're unfamiliar with this technology?
No, I think you're just making it up, to be honest.
No, he's not. They're these little kind of, I don't want to call them low tech because that's a little bit insulting to what they are, but they're just they're not fancy. They're not.
It's a thermometer or a hygrometer,
Yeah.
and it takes a reading every so often at whatever you decided it's going to take. And they have batteries in there, and they can last for years. You can leave them in walls to see. Ask Ben Bogey about it next time you talk to him, Mark.
Interesting. I'll be Googling that next. Shortly.
This is the perfect thing to put in your crawl space to be monitoring how things are going on down there.
And it sends a remote signal to another, like...
Some do, some record on board.
Yep.
Yeah, some are
Interesting.
Bluetooth. Yeah, it's cool stuff. I'll get you one for Christmas.
Christmas. Absolutely. Christmas is already over, though.
Oh, that's right. Happy New Year, guys.
Next Christmas.
Next Christmas, yeah.
Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks to Mark, Ian, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us. However you're listening, it helps other folks find our podcast. Happy New Year, everybody. Stay safe. Thanks very much for listening. Keep craft alive.